Since I mean, I don't even know what you teach. I thought I did.
So, my name is Deerra Hill, and I teach. Should I look at you for this?
You can.
I don't know.
It's better.
Okay. My name is Deerra Hill. I'm a teacher in Central Austin, and I teach video production and speech and everything else tech.
For how long?
For about 3 years now. This is going to be my 4th official year, but really 3 years so far under the belt.
Was that what you were doing before when you started?
Yes. When I first started out, I was only teaching video, but now I'm teaching graphic design, video, and also an engineering and professional communications course. So a few classes that take up my entire day, but it's a lot. Before I was just doing one course though.
This is high school, right?
High school, yeah.
So we were talking off camera about what you did film wise. What's the last thing that you did?
The last thing I did was a short film. It was to help out one of my friends. One of her friends was doing a short film that was supposed to be a romance type of thing. Mm-hmm. It was the last thing I did creative in terms of making a project. It wasn't exactly something I wanted to do. I ran sound. It was nice to be on set again, but it wasn't exactly like super fulfilling on the creative side.
Yeah, because you have your own ideas.
Yeah, sure.
What I guess like what do you want to do as project wise?
I want to work on this web series that I really been dreaming about for a while. I've been writing out the screens. I've been writing out the Bible for it for a while. It just feels like it's not going to happen anytime soon because I want it to be good. I want it to be different from anything else that I've released in like the last few years. I don't want it to be like, oh, a student made this. I want it to feel like, oh yeah, this is something I would purchase. I want to buy this. And right now I just don't think it's ready. Like there's some elements of it that I'm like, I really want this to be like mixed media with animation and live action cast. But like, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Mixed media, like, so half cartoon, half something else?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Nice. Was there anything else that like?
I'm working on a comic book right now. The comic book has been probably the passion project of the year. Like, I already finished it. It's called The Forever Boys. It has everything that makes me happy. Like it's everything I want to read. It's a detective story. It's horror, it's suspense, and I love it. The issue is finding an artist to illustrate has been a pain in the... Yes. I have somebody right now. She lives in Egypt. She's awesome. But, I mean, what I'm getting isn't exactly what I want. So that's also been kind of difficult. Like, do you settle? Do you keep it? So just trying to figure out what the happy medium is for when you want to do something that you really love, but also you want to release things to the world so people can see what you're working on. So I've definitely been struggling with that, but I've been writing a lot. That's really where my art has been taking me, like at this stage in my life.
When you first started film school, did you have an idea like of what you were going to do?
I thought I was going to be Steven Spielberg.
Like a director?
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to college specifically to learn how do I be that man. I'm in love with almost everything that he's created. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what my life is going to be. And I wanted to do everything I can to get that. And unfortunately, I didn't get into schools in California. So when I got into the Art Institute, I was sold on the dream. I was like, okay, like this is going to happen. I just wanted to learn everything I can. I wanted to be the sponge. But yeah, that was what I thought I wanted. I didn't really know what it meant to be a director until I started doing projects, and I love it, but I don't think that's really where I see my life going anymore. Like I don't necessarily want to direct anymore. I don't want to produce. I really just want to write.
I gotcha. So how after school, like what made you decide to go to what you're doing now?
COVID-19.
COVID-19.
Yeah. In 2019, after graduation, I actually had an internship with NBC. So I was going to leave to New York. That got canceled because that's when we started to get the cases of like, oh, there's something going on.
Yeah.
And like, okay, it's like Ebola. It's going to disappear in like a few weeks.
Yeah.
But it did not. So I lost that internship and I had a job. I was working at a physical therapy center, just temporarily part-time. And when we started to close down, she wasn't taking any more clients. And I was like, okay, well, I've always wanted to teach. I always wanted to be a professor, but like later in life, like I was hoping like maybe when I'm like 50. But suddenly I find myself in this position where like I need a job and I also don't know what our career is going to look like at this stage in life. Like we're in a pandemic. So I actually started to go to GCU to get my education degree. And after the first semester, I hated it. There's only so many essays you can do on child psychology before you're like, okay, this is easy. This is common sense, like, isn't it? So I was like, if I'm going to get like a higher education degree, I'm going to get it in something I want to do. So I went to school for screenwriting and playwriting. And that kind of solidified that I was like, I really want to be a writer still. But I also found Region 20, the Texas education, to help me get certified by the state. I was like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. So I got certified by the state of Texas. That was exhausting, but now I can teach like anywhere in Texas, technology applications or filmmaking. And I really liked it starting out, and I still like teaching. I love it. I now have a different perspective on, I just feel so bad now. Like I wasn't exactly the best student growing up. So I'm apologizing every day for everything I go through at work, for all the things that take place. But I feel like I'm not answering your question, Jesse.
No. I got it. Has there been like a project that you've seen like a student do that you're like, wow, like that's like giving you ideas?
I wouldn't say like ideas like creatively, but they help me keep my passion. I think is probably like a better way to like phrase it. Like they don't really give me ideas, but they keep me like, oh, I should keep creating because they're so excited about it. Like I had my very first year, cause like we're all wearing masks and I was like pretty like, I wasn't feeling creative. And my like first class, they create this whole like backroom spinoff thing. And it was pretty cool. We didn't have a lot starting off in like the program we were creating, and like they really just made a lot out of nothing. And it was just kind of like, oh, I remember what that felt like that passion and that love for something. And they just like kept having like these types of ideas. Like some of them are really bad, but it was all like, when they executed, it was like, oh, wow, that's actually pretty impressive. Like, let's put that on our school page. Yeah.
So I guess what I mean by like, when I ask you that is because when I was teaching art, I was exposing them to a lot of different mediums. And for me, charcoal and pastel, when I saw that, I was like, wow. So I later did like a bunch of artwork on my own in that. So I guess that's what I was meaning by that.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's so cool when you actually see a bunch of different artworks by like different students. And there was a moment when like I would see a bunch of different pieces and I would be like, wow, I can't really do that. Like I can't go back because I guess when you have like someone who's like a kindergartner and they do like a piece of art, it's hard to, and you're like a skilled artist, it's hard to go back and do that. So That's what I meant. But like, let me hit you with these questions here.
Oi.
Okay, let's see. Do you think the most profound lesson a teacher imparts are found in the curriculum? Or do they come from unspoken, subtle ways they influence students' character and approach to life?
It's definitely the second part of that question. The curriculum is what you make of it.
Yeah.
I say that with the fact that a lot of teachers who educate are not experts in the curriculum that they are teaching. It's this generation, all generations, like we spend most of our time at school. So right. It's pretty important to figure out how are we going to lead this generation into, I don't know, take care of us one day, make sure that they become like decent citizens of society. It's the unspoken lessons that we teach. It's not really about the curriculum. The curriculum is there. It's easy. It's something that you can fall back on. I don't think that's really teaching, though. I think that's just like giving instruction. Like, right. Yeah, follow these instructions, do this. But something as simple as like manners, like how you can ask for something, like how you actually like perceive the people around you, I think is like a big part of education. If we wanted them to learn just basic curriculum, then we should just have robots teaching at that point.
Yeah. When you first like went into it, was it what you expected, or did you get in there and go, wait a minute, like I have to teach and then I have to try to control and get them to behave? Was it overwhelming?
Yeah. I actually started out in a middle school. Okay. And I had this conception that like, oh, I just had bad teachers. Like, it's fine. I'll go in there and I'll just be chill and cool. And then instantly I realized like, oh my God, like you can't just go in here and be like chill and cool. Like you need structure. You need rules to run a class. You can't just go in there and think you know everything. Right. And you have to be prepared that like you're not always going to have a good day. Like you're just going to have a day sometimes, and you just have to be okay with that. Yeah, it was not what I expected. But I'm glad I had that reality check pretty early. I realized I didn't want to teach middle schoolers pretty early on. It was like a month in. So I transitioned to high school. But that helped me understand that I really need to focus on like what I want my day to look like when I go to work, and not just, oh, like what I'm going to do, but just like what's my end goal every day. And then what are some strategies I can do to achieve that?
So you mainly focus on just the rule part, right?
Kinda.
First going in.
Yeah.
When I went in, it was all about like, I just want to teach. Yeah. Like, I just want to get through. I don't want to have to spend like days talking about, okay, you're going to come in, sit down, and go by these rules.
Yeah.
But that's definitely what you have to do, right?
Yeah. Because, I mean, yeah, the teaching part's the best part, but it feels like that's like 35% of your job when you're teaching. It's like when you actually get to just have like a smooth day of like, wow, I'm going to cover something I really want to teach them, and they are going to love it and be engaged. And you're like, oh my God, that was the best 15 minutes ever. But it's not that. It's a lot of redirection. It's a lot of preparing. It's a lot of anxiety. And it's like, it's a lot of paying attention, differentiation. You can't just go in there and teach. You have to go in there and almost like parent like your students. And I wasn't necessarily prepared for that. That was something I had to learn later.
So you go in, you're really excited about, the lesson, and they'll be excited for the lesson also. Is that how you like?
That's what I wanted, but that's not necessarily what happened. They had to figure out how am I going to, after they weren't excited about the lessons, I had to figure out like, how am I going to make sure that this is relatable to them and they can stay engaged? And that's the main thing. Like, I had to learn how to keep students engaged in this material, because even though it feels so like, why is this not interesting to you? We all have different flavors, and school is not necessarily every kid's flavor.
In a world that's driven by technology and rapid innovation, how do we ensure that human element, empathy, emotional intelligence, creativity, remain at the forefront of education?
Oi, 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 oi. I feel like this is happening right now with the usage of AI that's coming up in education. There's definitely a divide in the teaching front of like using it as a tool versus just having it take over or not using it at all. I kind of feel like as a teacher, if you are losing your soul, your empathy, your care for the children, or just like this just feels like a day-to-day, like something that just happens, I think it's time to call it quits, find a different career path, because it doesn't change. Like it's you need these elements to humanize people. Like maybe you would agree by this,
right.
But the students are really desensitized like to things, like horrible things are happening all around the world, and our kids are just like, oh, ho, 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 it's so funny. Like they're like, oh, like they're making jokes about Diddy right now, and it's like they don't even really understand like what that is even about. They're just like, oh, like it's so funny. Like they're so desensitized, and I think because of that, it makes it hard for them to relate to things that are happening. Like they don't care, but that also like really speaks to like the people around them, their educators, their role models, their leaders. And so if we can't keep that, like these very simple values like close to us, then it's like our students don't have a chance. They're gonna continue to be just like, what's the word for this? Non-emotional. Like there's a better word, but we're gonna go with non-emotional.
So I guess because they're using screens and stuff, right, in your class. But do you feel like that teaching, because technology is like moving so fast, that they would still need an instructor or like some type of guidance? Because you can pretty much learn mostly anything, right?
Yeah.
Online, at your fingertips, on your phone.
I mean, yes, but I think when you're young, I think you need to learn the skill. Like you need to learn how to learn. You need to learn how to utilize skills like comprehension, like context clues. And like, those are not skills that every kid just like, nobody's born with that. Like you have to learn that. I think when you leave secondary school, I think you should have these basic skills to be able to like take initiative with your own education. And I think that really comes from like if you choose to go to like higher education, or you're like, you know exactly what kind of job you want and you want to learn, but we have to still teach them like how to learn, like how to take notes. That's actually something we deal with right now at school. I'm telling them we can't just assume that they know how to do everything.
Right.
Like you didn't know how to walk once, so you have to teach them. Even with like, cause in my class, you're right, we do use screens, but I like to make them pull away from the screens a lot. It's like, come on, guys, like we need to have social interactions.
Oh, okay.
That way they know how to communicate with other people, not just like through a screen or on a phone, behind their safe space where they can turn their camera off, but they need to know how to have dialogue. And not knowing how to do that, like our entire society is not completely like online yet. We're still definitely offline on majority of things. And you need to know how to interview for like to get a job.
Right.
And some of them, they have so much anxiety with the fact that they have to even like talk, like sitting down. It's like, I don't want anybody to hear my voice. So what if they don't like my accent? Like they're too concerned with like this how people will perceive them. Right. And I think that comes from just being so sheltered behind technology that they're not actually like getting experience or letting themselves fail or be disappointed. Like they don't want to fail, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, because especially in art, because for me, that was the biggest thing. I was like, oh my God, now I have to talk about this.
Yeah.
Now I have to like present it and I have to back it up. So you have like your artwork. Do y'all do things like that to where you're actually teaching them, hey, you got to get up here. You got to talk about this and answer questions.
Yeah. They hate it, but I make them do it. Every time they finish an edit for a video, we'll show it in front of class. They're cool with that. And I'm like, okay, now tell us about it. And I ease them into it. I'm like, okay, you can write it out and I'll read it first, right? That's project 1. Project 2, okay, you can present it, but from your desk. And then number 3, it's like you're standing up there and you're telling us about your work and you should be proud to tell us about your work. But it's like you can't just push them and throw them to the wolves. Like you have to ease them into it because they never had to do it. Especially now, like education, they just push people through. So there's so many students who are like really lacking like comprehension, just skills in general. But the main thing is like public speaking.
Yeah.
These kids do not want to do that. And there's some kids who are excellent and they're like, yeah, I want to do that. But it's because they are just very extroverted and they had that opportunity in life to really polish that skill. But a lot of students haven't. And the only way they're going to get over it is by doing it. And unfortunately, a lot of teachers just rather like, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You know, like I get you want to be like the cool person, but it's like you're not helping them. You're actually making the problem worse.
So like with education in technology changing, you still feel that a teacher's needed to guide the student?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got you. What role does failure play in the learning process?
It teaches you every time you fail, you just learn, okay, can't do it that way. Let me try a different way. It should be a learning measure. Like you shouldn't be afraid of failure. Like when my students come in, they're just like, oh my God, like I was so close to passing. And like they think because they got a 68 on a test, like that means they were so close. I was like, well, let's see what we got right.
Yeah.
You weren't close to passing. You just were, you got a lot wrong, which means you're missing a lot here. Like 70 is far away from 100. Let's see what the actual problem is here. It's like the more you fail, the more we need to focus on other aspects. There's obviously something we're not getting. Let's see why. Right. I think you need to fail. If you don't fail, then you're never going to know what you need to change or work on. There's always something to work on. Like failure is a good thing. And I wish we can broadcast that more to students so they can be okay with failing. Like I know like you can't fail through like, your entire career in school because then you'll never graduate, right?
Yeah.
But eventually there's the learning element, right? Like you have to learn, or allow yourself to learn that, okay, like maybe I shouldn't keep stacking the cups like this. Maybe I should try to stack them like this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me because I kind of like, especially in art, like I didn't want to fail. Like I wanted to come out of the gate like on top all the time.
Yeah.
And for me, that put like a lot of stress on myself because I'm thinking about it. I want it to be good. And then I'm looking at other people's projects. And I kind of also with that, like in school, especially with film, you put a lot of stress on yourself because you're like, I want to be better than everybody. I want my project to be better. I want it to be good.
Oh, don't we know? I mean, like, yeah, we put like we have these thinking traps where we're like, okay, I have to be better than everybody else. If I'm not, then I'm not going to be selected, or I'm not going to be the one to make it out of like just San Antonio. Like I have to be the best. And I mean, it's very toxic.
Yeah.
I think that's also part of like why students are so afraid of failure, why they don't want to try or take risks. They want to just be medium or average, because then they don't have to compete or feel like they need to compete.
Do you encourage students to take risks?
Yeah, all the time. I think the more risks they take, like the more comfortable they will be with making decisions about their future. They want to take the comfortable choices, right?
Right.
And one of the things I really preach is like exposure. Like, you have to expose kids to different avenues of work, pathways. And when you do that, then they can take a risk. Like, you know what if I actually want to be like a zoologist? I'm like, okay, let's figure out how,
Right.
But they don't know unless you expose that to them. Like, they'll just go with like, well, my mom's this, or like my uncle does this. I guess I'll just do that, because they don't know any better.
What has been the most challenging moment in your teaching career, and how did it shape you both personally and professionally?
I think the most challenging moment, I think the most challenging moment in my teaching career was having to deal with students who are depressed and or suicidal. I had one student in particular that it was my first year. My first year was kind of wild, but my first year I had a student, they were part of the LGBTQ. And they were in transition. And during my first year, the school was not as accepting or woke. So it wasn't necessarily like the safest of places that year. But this student like came to me and was telling me like they wanted to like end their life, and they were in one of the classes I facilitate. And at first I was like, how do I deal with this? Like, how do I can't leave this kid alone and just walk away and be like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. But I also couldn't just like pretend like I knew like what their situation was, right, and like tell them it's going to be okay. So I really struggled with like that scenario, and the student didn't do it. The student's like super healthy, and they're living their best life in California. But I kind of just told them like what I would want to hear in that moment, and just listened to them. And they just kept talking about just what was going on, what was affecting them. And then like we started to talk about what we had control over.
Right.
And suddenly like they realized how much they actually had control over the situation they were dealing with, and what was like really bringing them down. And how that changed me is I developed a lot more empathy for my students.
Yeah, for sure.
Because issues that I'm like, like it's not a big deal. That's a high school problem, Yeah. But in that moment, that problem or those problems that they're facing, those are very real to them. And the emotions that they're feeling, like they're valid. And it sucks when somebody else just tells you that like your feelings don't matter, or like what you're feeling doesn't matter. And like, I think that definitely made me more empathetic, not just as a teacher, but as a person, like really taking the opportunity to try to understand what somebody else is going through, and not judging them because like they made the decision or it's their fault, but just really like, what if? Like, what if that was me? Or what if that was somebody else that like is closer to me, and like, but in this moment, I'm responsible for your life.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't want this conversation to be the moment where it's like, you were really asking for help. 'Cause that's what they were doing. They were asking for help, but, it was a teachable moment for me because I didn't know how to deal with it, but I still had to deal with it. And I think I did fine. I have all my students who graduated, well, most of them I have like a really good relationship with. Like they call to tell me about their life, and I'm like, I'm so happy for you. And nice. So like that's pretty cool to hear about sometimes, that they're just doing well, especially knowing like there's a time when they weren't,
Yeah, that for me, one of the issues was bullying. Like when it first came to my attention, I was like, oh my God, all this stuff is happening right in front of you, and you don't really know.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking with a parent about it, and I was like, but they're friends. They're laughing together. But that's not what's going on. You have to really like listen, and you kind of got to like be in their life.
Yeah.
You got to like listen to what's going on.
It's a fine line, because the bullying one is hard, because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, like, are they kidding?
Yeah.
It's like, or if I'm being crazy. I had a situation like that recently. A student in my class was making like borderline racist comments, but the kid that was supposed to be offended by it was just like kind of going with it. And I just had a conversation with them about like appropriate language. Like we shouldn't be like using like, but they also weren't saying anything that was like actually racist. It's like things that we would probably say in the comfort of your friends. And you're like, ah,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. But we just taught them time and place. But there was students in the class who were offended, and they like brought it to my attention. And I was like, and it wasn't just like, oh, it wasn't just this. It was this, like a list of things. And I was like, in my head, I was like, how do I even really address that? You know,
Yeah.
I was like, is it racist, or is it bullying even? And then like, cause they also clapped back. I was like, maybe they're fighting. I don't really know. I totally understand what you mean. It's hard to identify. Yeah.
I don't think that one will ever go away. Because even with me, like growing up, I could remember moments like that.
Yeah.
And then there's moments where like you didn't want to go to the teacher with that.
Yeah.
I feel like now it's different.
Yeah.
Like they'll definitely come to you for something like that.
Yeah, like our school, they snitch. Like it's great. Like they're like, oh, guess what happened? Like before the phone ban, like if like kids are not supposed to be sleeping on campus or anything of the sort, like, or if they're breaking dress code. And we had like this group of students who would go around, they would take photos of like students who fell asleep.
Yeah.
And or students who like were caught with paraphernalia or vapes, or students who like are out of dress code, and they would like send them to like the teacher's email. They're like, oh look, we caught another one. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is this culture?
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel they're more honest now.
Yeah.
Like this whole new generation.
There's no ride or die in this situation.
Yeah, and the phone thing, I don't think there's just like an easy answer for that. Like that's going to be one of those things that's not going to go away so long as technology. Yeah.
I mean, at my campus, we have the phone box, and so far that's been working really well. Essentially, we like when they come in their homeroom classroom, they have to put their phone in phone jail. And we do have like some of the students try to be slick with their we call them their trap phones.
Right.
And they're just like, okay, so like you got a decoy, got it. I have one student that has 6 phones that he brings every day. And now that we know, like literally he gives us a stack of phones.
6 phones?
6 phones.
Why? Did he give you a reason?
I have some theories why he has 6 phones, but I'm not going to throw this kid under the bus. Right. But how he's paying for all these plans, I can't even tell you.
Can education ever be truly objective, or does every teacher knowingly or unknowingly impart their own worldview and biases?
I think I don't think it's so much like teacher wise. I think it's like a state by state, country by country thing. I think we all want to do right by the students and like give them the information that we think, that's the part right there, right? We think is valuable. I think it's important to like know perspective. So I think it's a lot of bias. Because, I mean, for starters, like Texas, like our curriculum is different from California's curriculum. Like our kids transfer in and they're like, oh, now you have to take Texas history and now you're not a senior anymore. You're a junior.
Well, you grew up in Texas, right?
Partially.
Oh, okay.
Military brat, so I traveled around.
Oh, right.
But luckily for me, I did high school all in Texas. So I didn't have to have that issue. But I see it with my students coming in. They're transferring and they're angry. They're like, oh, I was a senior. I was like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's a lot of bias. I think politics play a huge role in education. And I think teachers, they take an opportunity to persuade or mold students into like, okay, I don't want you to be like this type of person. So I'm going to give you like my insight, but also manipulate it in a way that doesn't feel like I'm trying to brainwash you, but at the same time, brainwash you. I like to teach the students like all perspectives, even the perspectives I don't like instance, instance with, we have a unit where we go over in speech, like the different types of policies. And like, we go over like, who's a good speech, like not speech, who's a good presenter. And we talk about like some dictators who really give really great speeches. And Hitler is not exactly like the best role model, but guy knew how to give a speech. I mean, he manipulated an entire nation to do what they did. So we go over like concepts like this, and sometimes like the students want to ask more questions, which is a good thing. And so it can get political sometimes. And one of the things I always do is like, okay, but like, let's know all the sides, right? We can't just be like, okay, they did this, so they're bad. I was like, let's go full circle and understand everything. Like, even though I'm going to have my own opinions of the matter, it's not my job to like put my opinions in their mouth. It's my job to make sure that they're aware that there's multiple opinions and there's multiple sides. And then it's really up to them what they do with that information.
What's your teaching philosophy? Do you have a teaching philosophy?
I think my teaching philosophy is just exposure. The more you expose, like my guide, I actually have like a teaching philosophy. It's written down. It's on my, it's on my resume, but, to recite it, I couldn't do it verbatim, but, my teaching philosophy is to be less of a teacher, more of a guide and a mentor. So my job is to help you realize what you want to do. Like, I don't want to tell you this is what you need to know. I want to expose you to everything that you should know, and then open up and help you open up your brain to new possibilities. Like, I felt so restricted as a child in education. Like, there's questions I had and I would get shut down for. I was like, oh, we can't talk about that. Oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that. I'm like, why can't we? I was like, let's talk about it. So I really focus on exposure. I feel like students should be like, I'm really against the book ban, for instance. Like, like I think we should be allowing children to like read and ask questions and know why the questions are dangerous.
What do you have an example of something like that you can remember trying to ask questions about, and it was like a no topic?
Let me think.
Because the biggest one right now is being gay, right? LGBTQ. There's certain things you can't really ask. Certain things you can't really teach.
It depends on the school and definitely on the state. So if we're in Florida, that is not something we could talk about. Can't even talk about like female anatomy. Sex education is definitely like a big no-no right now in schools, which is unfortunate because it's not even just about like sex, you know, it's really just like about like, how does the body work, for one?
Right.
Like, I have a lot of female students who always come to me that are just like, Ms. Hill, why is this happening to me? And like having to explain to them like, oh, you're having your first cycle, you know, and it's like so taboo in some cultures, and it's super taboo at school. And it's like, but it's like, these are hormonal issues that are happening to students. Like they're in the meat of it. So it's like, what is it? They're in the thick of it. I don't know these sentences, but they don't know like what's going on with their bodies and why things are happening to them. And so they're going to grow up ignorant. And then they're going to go to sources that are not exactly the most educational to figure out, oh, that's what this is for. Oh, this is how I do it. Oh, you know, thank you, web.md. Like, we love you. And we need that in schools to help students understand like how their body works. I think there's this misconception that we're going to be teaching students like different positions or something. And it's like, that's not it.
The nature of teaching has evolved over time. In your experience, what do you believe is the core essence of being a great teacher in today's world?
Being Deerra Hill. And I think to be a great teacher, I think it's really that's subjective. Like, I don't think that. I think you're only as great as your students. So if you're willing to meet them halfway, then I think that you can be great. But each year can be different, right? Like, depending on the group of kids you have, the energy that you're willing to put in. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, how much energy and effort are you willing to put in for your students? Are you just here to do the bare minimum? are you happy with your students just passing, or are you happy with your students learning? Like, are you happy with your students actually understanding and coming back? Like, I have students who fail my class often, but they will return and ask questions. And to me, I feel like that's a win, because that means you're engaged and you want to know why that you're like missing these things. And like, it makes me feel like, okay, like, let me do something different to help you. And like, that means I can continue to grow, because like, I need to make sure that like you're included in the growth. I feel like if a student just got a 100 and they just keep it pushing, and then you ask them a question, they're like, I don't know, I'm just a good test taker. And I'm like, okay, well, that's awesome. You're going to pass. You're going to have an excellent GPA, but then what?
Right.
So I think making a teacher great really just means like, how much energy are you willing to put in to make sure all your students are successful? Even the most difficult ones. Like, sometimes it's easier just to be like, little Jimmy, somebody get little Jimmy out of here. But little Jimmy, has a story and a reason for being too. And like, we have to help little Jimmy succeed as well. Right. It's like, you don't have to like all your students. I don't love all my students, but I definitely don't hate them. Like, if I did, I wouldn't be a teacher. I tell my students, I was like, the day I start to hate you guys is the day I quit.
So what advice do you have, if any, for a would-be teacher watching? What can they expect?
Like a new teacher? I would say, write down your rules of your expectations. Like, what are you not okay with? I would also say, take an interest in the culture of your students. So if, depending on the side of town that you're teaching at, or like the demographic, like, take an interest in what they do, what their life is like. Don't use stereotypes. But like, actually like, educate yourself on who you're going to be teaching. Figure out how you can approach them. You don't need to relate to them, but you can meet them halfway and understand. Don't act like you're the smartest person in the room, but make sure you know what your boundaries are as a teacher, as a person. Like, what are you not going to be okay with? Things that we think is funny, like on TV, like we think it's funny. Like, we're like, oh my God, that kid cussed on television, because we're like filmmakers too. Yeah. But you're in the classroom, and honestly, like, it's like a work environment. So you can't, like, what are you okay with? And when you know what you're okay with and not okay with, it makes it kind of easier to structure your entire class, because then they know. I think more than anything, students like structure. And when they don't have it, they act out.
That's definitely true. So I think you said it earlier, like, having to deal with that situation with that one student.
Yeah.
About, they wanted to hurt themselves. Are there any other crazy moments that you've had to deal with something like that?
Yeah. I had a group of girls that told me that one of my students was sexually harassing them. And my first thought in my head was like, that sweet little boy. I was like, he did what? And having to figure out, like, I was like, did he do something and they took it out of context? Is this one of those situations where it's just like, they're lying, they don't like him? But I'm like, listening to them, they're all crying. They're like, we want to like do like a formal complaint. So we're telling you. And I'm like, what is a formal complaint? Like, why are you telling me? Like, cause it's like outside of class, and they went out of their way to find me to tell me about this kid. And at first I was just like, okay, like, can you write down like what happened? Like what was said, like what he did. And it was just like, there were so many things, and I'm trying to like remember like how things looked, right? And I'm like, did he say that? Like, is that what he meant? Like, and I'm feeling like, am I a failure as a teacher? Like, did I not catch that? But, ultimately, like, I took all their complaints and like made sure like they weren't going to be around this individual anymore. But that wasn't really the hard part. The hard part was the student was, considered special needs.
Oh, wow.
So it made the situation a little bit more complicated, because there's two sides to this. They're like, is it because of their disability and they was taken out of context, or is this kid self-aware and doing these things and using this as an excuse, right? But regardless, like, personal space is personal space. So It's like, you can't have a student like touching a kid just to touch a kid whenever they want to. And so it was very difficult. That parent wasn't exactly super helpful. They were like, these girls are lying, and it was a lot of parents involved, and like, it felt like everybody wanted me to do something about it. And I didn't really know what to do in this situation.
Such a serious like moment, right?
Yeah.
And then when you have it, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What should I do? Were you prepared for anything like that?
No.
Did it like cross your mind that this is like, I might have to deal with this?
It never did.
No?
Like that.
Because you don't really think of how it was when you were growing up, right?
You start
Completely
to play it back. And you're like, wow, was I sexually harassed? You start thinking about like, because, kids today are not taking shit anymore. Like, it's like, and they shouldn't have to. Like, I think about when I was in middle school, like, the boys back then would, like, on Fridays, they would always slap every girl's, like, ass. And it was like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's, like, not okay. But, like, when you're a kid, you're like, ha, 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 ha.
It's funny.
Yeah. But now it's like, this is not funny, Like, this is actually, like,
This is serious.
You should keep your hands to yourself. But then, like, the whole element of, like, also them being special needs was also like in play, and just like, how do you handle this without coming off as like, oh, you are bigoted. Like, you don't know like what you're doing. You don't know like why they're going through. You don't know what their struggle is. And it's like, I just don't want kids to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How can we come to a consensus on this? We can't kick the kid out because their mom is pleading like, no, this is disability. But we also have to appease like this group of parents who are upset by the student. I think we have to come back to the foundation, which is like, we have to protect all students. So if there is a student that is a threat, then it's like, but it's like, was he a threat? It was also like another thing too. So kind of coming full circle, what I did is I told, I got this group of girls together and we had a conversation. I said, what is it that you would like to see happen? And all of them said, we don't want him to get kicked out. And I was like, okay, well, what would you want to see take place? And they all said, we want them to stop. That's it. And so multiple conversations were had with this individual, therapy and so on. And like, they stopped and everything was fine, but it was complicated and I never wanted to go through that again.
Yeah. So it was just conversation. Speaking with this person.
And pressure. Like the conversations were not really like, it was more like getting yelled at and listening. And I don't really do well when I'm getting yelled at by parents. Because I want to be like, shut up,
Yeah.
But I understand like why they're upset, like they send their kids here and they're telling a teacher that they trust that something's happening to them. And it's like, there isn't much I can do in this scenario because then I have another side that's like doing this. And then at the end of the day, I didn't see any of it happen. So it's like, I'm really just going like, she said, he said type of thing.
Do you have a close relationship with the parents?
I have a pretty mild relationship with most of the parents.
For me, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
That helped a lot because some of the parents knew that their kids were bad.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't behave.
The ones that are difficult, I have a better relationship with. With all the other parents, like they know me, I know them, and we speak. They come out, I shake hands, we hug, we laugh, we chat. But I don't really check in with them as much unless I need to or unless I want to. But I have an open communication, so they're able to like reach out whenever they want to. But a lot of them choose not to.
Yeah, I remember like having to meet with parents, and some parents I would be like, oh man, I'm gonna get yelled at, stuff like that. And they were just really sweet.
Yeah.
That alone was kind of, for me, real helpful, because it helped me to like get control of the ones that were out of control, right? That and their coaches, or if they're in any sports.
Yeah.
If you were to make a documentary or film about the education system, what story would you want to tell? What message would you hope viewers would take away?
I think I would make a documentary about administration. I think, I would want to show that there is a group of individuals who make decisions on behalf of teachers, and they're not here. They don't see what we face. I think I would want that documentary to feature like the day in the life of working title, the day in the life of an educator, but through the lens. I don't know, but it's like the administration teams, they make all these, we have TEA comes to our campus, we get audits, and they come in, they tell us, oh, you need a better door. Okay, are you going to fund it?
What's TEA?
TEA, Texas Education Agency.
Oh, okay. TEA.
What a TEA, yeah. I'm just saying it quick, TEA. Just, they come in and they make these demands. They say, you need to do this, you need to start doing this, you need to have this. And it's like, okay, awesome, perfect. So is that coming out of your paycheck? Is it coming out of my paycheck? Because I'm not paying for that, you know? Yeah. Like, you're asking for a lot. You're like, well, parents. I was like, okay, well, not all these parents are come from like a great financial situation. I would want to show that education, it's, at least in America, feels like it's a luxury. And because of that, there isn't a lot of resources at our disposal. And they really want teachers, and maybe you can relate to this, they really want teachers to put in all the creativity and the effort, and it's just not feasible all the time. And so a lot of things, there's a lot that we want to do, and I feel like teachers get criminalized a lot for wanting to help. Yeah. That it's like, you don't want to do things. Like, when there's a fight, they advise you, oh, well, don't do anything, you know, don't help. But then it's like, at the same time, your student from sixth period is getting whooped. Right. And you're like, okay, well, we got to do something. Like, they're going to get brain trauma. Can't like just let them get slammed against a locker like that. And so like, you intervene, but then you get a talking to, like, why'd you do that? You know? And it's like, well, it's the same when there's like a situation on a campus and you have to go through protocols, and you're like, we have a threat on campus, and like, you're getting a talking to, well, why did you do the assessment like that? It's like these people above us are constantly making decisions. And I would want to show that. I would want to show how useless they can be, and when we really need help. The message feels more like as an attack, but also like they get played significantly more than educators. And part of their job is just having meetings about our jobs without actually talking to us. And I think that's a problem. Right.
Yeah. I could definitely understand, because that's how I felt. I felt really limited in a lot of things. That was a big thing for me. Yeah. So how does a teacher balance the need for structure learning with the freedom to explore ideas outside the curriculum? Is there a tension between teaching what's required and fostering intellectual curiosity?
Yeah. I always start off my classes with, what do you want to learn? Like, what are you interested in? And I kind of just do like a popcorn of like, tell me like ideas that you just want to know about. And if I don't know, then maybe we can learn together. I think having a guideline is awesome in the sense of like, I know what it needs to be, but it also doesn't mean it has to be exactly that. It just needs to incorporate these. I think being in technology applications is easier though than like social studies or probably even science, because there's specific things that they want out of the curriculum. Which can be hard because now you're playing with rules of the district. But with things that I'm teaching, it's easier because it's all creative. And so it's like we're focused on, as long as I'm teaching this skill, it doesn't really matter how we're teaching it, as long as it's appropriate for the school setting. So once I know, like, for instance, this year, I'm focusing on graphic design at the beginning of the year, and then we're going to do video production the second half. And that works for us because all of the kids really want to focus on like, I really just want to like be certified in Photoshop. And I was like, okay, then we're all going to get certified in Photoshop. And just having that flexibility to know like what they're interested in helps, even the ones who are not interested. But I have conversations. I have 112 students on like in total. And I talked to all of them one-on-ones. They all had a one-on-one with me. And I know what they want, what they need, what they're looking for, and what they hate. And even if this is not what they want, we talk about, well, how can we utilize these skills? How are they transferable? But yeah, I think I can always be creative with me. If speaking from one of my coworkers, though, that teaches history, he utilizes the months essentially, like the significance of like Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month as an excuse to kind of stray away from the curriculum. Yeah. And like, so he gets really creative with like how he presents like different artists and work. Back to me, when I'm teaching like the art history requirement, it doesn't say who is required. It says I'm supposed to like educate them on like a certain figures, but I always look for really obscure people of different races, nationalities, genders, just to show like this isn't, we're just not learning about 4 different types of artists. There's so many more. Right. And honestly, you don't even have to use these ones when you do your report. But wanting them to know that there isn't just Frida. Like we love Frida, but that she's not the only one. But yeah, I think that's really like the main thing. Like because of what I teach, I have a little bit more creative freedom, but so I don't have to really feel too limited. I just always remind the students when they choose what they do, it just needs to be school appropriate. So we can't talk about, we tell them like no guns. And we do, in my class at least, we do something called trigger warnings, where it's like, what do you not want to see in the classroom? And that's really helpful because then we know, like, let's just like stay away from these topics in general, even if it's like alluding to it, let's just not talk about it. And like that kind of helps the class feel like a safe space because then they know, oh, I don't have to hear about that.
What do you think, like, if you like look at the education system, what do you think is missing? What do you think that should be taught? Like, so for example, for me, I felt like finance and stuff should be taught. That's like a major thing. Yeah. Right? Like growing up and then in high school, like when you get out, like how do you buy a car? How do you buy a house? Yeah. Right? How do you do your taxes? You kind of feel the same way on that?
Yeah, 100%. I know it's an elective now, but I feel like it shouldn't be an elective. It should be like a continual, I feel like it should be like a class like life skills. Yeah. Like, and I think it should be a class that you're in, maybe like homeroom setting. Like you go to this class every day and we're learning how to do life. Like, like seriously, like, how do you pay your rent? Right. Like, credit card. Yeah. Oh, don't buy store credit. Yeah.
Like percentage.
I'm like, what is insurance?
Right. What are interest rates? God.
Loans? Yeah, like a life skills class, I feel like loaded with that type of knowledge would be super beneficial. I feel like there's like remnants of like, oh, let's like do a life skills class, right. But it should really just be curriculum. It should be just full throttle, like throughout your high school career, your middle school career. Like you should be learning like something as simple as cooking. Like I know we had like cooking classes in like elementary school, depending on the school, but like I think even continuing that, like as like this is a class that you're gonna have to have. We're not gonna be expert chefs, but just basic how to do skills. Yeah. How to do your dishes.
Right? So like when you were going into film, you want to be a director. Was it easy for you to communicate what you wanted? So for me, like I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to explain, especially when you're directing, like you're trying to explain what you want and you don't know how to get it across to your actors or the cameraman. So I would just do pictures. Be like, see this picture right here? This is what I want. Yeah. This is what I want the shot to look. Did you find it easy to communicate with your actors and communicating what you want?
I felt like I struggled with communicating with my crew more so than my actors. I think it was also just because of how I talked to people. If we think about The Cure, right? I don't think I was communicating well with the crew about like how I wanted everything to look and be. I think I was just really focused on like, I know how it's going to sound. I know how like the actors are going to perform. But when it came down to like the post portion, I was like, oh crap. Like I kind of know what it looks like in my head, but like I can't like USB that information down. Right. And so I felt like that really fell apart. I didn't know how to like communicate that information. I never was taught to.
Well, because now you're teaching.
Yeah.
Right. And now you have to communicate. Yeah. You have to make sure that they understand it and get it. So do you think that if you were to do something now, it would just be flawless?
Maybe.
I don't think anything would be flawless, but would it be smooth?
I think so. Having to be patient was something I had to learn, and to understand, like checking for understanding. Like, do you understand what we're doing? Like, can you explain that to me? Like, I was like, I don't need to baby like adults when we're on a set, but like, I think I would be better at communicating like what the vision is. I think I'm more accessible with like being called out to on like, yeah, you can call me that out. Like, I'm wrong. My students do it all the time. They're like, Ms. Hill, come again? I was like, oh, yeah, let's go with your idea. Like, I think I'm more open to like changes. I don't think I've always been super open. I've been like, no, like this is my baby. Like, actually, I watched this video that Seth Rogen had. He was like just talking about like, don't treat your scripts like they're your child. He's like, treat them like they're nothing. And that way, like, you're not married to it. Like, if you like don't like an idea, if somebody doesn't love it, we can change it. And I think that's how I like approach education. I'm like, oh, we don't understand that? Do we get that? And like, if I'm noticing that they're not understanding a concept, I'm like, abandon it and let's try something different. And instead of trying to make something that's not working work, let's just do something else. And I think I can transition that into filmmaking and just like, okay, like this isn't working. Let me try it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely get that. How do you think the role of a teacher evolves as a student grows older? Is the teacher influenced more about imparting knowledge in the early stages and later about guiding students navigating life's complexities?
Yeah. So I have a group of students that I've had since my first year. And so it's like, they're all juniors now. And now they're not really learning from me anymore. They're like, oh, we got it. We don't need your help. You're fine. Like, just tell us what the lesson is. We're going to do it. I'm like, okay. So sometimes I feel pretty useless, but it feels more like the mentor piece is on here. Cause now they want to know, like, what do I do next? Not like for the grade, but like, how do I get an internship? Can you help me? Like now they all want to go get like a job at like JCPenney's or something. I don't know. I think it was JCPenney's or GameStop. I don't know. But they were like, oh, we need your help to like fix our resumes. And I'm like, okay. And so now they're like asking for like that assistance. Like they're already going to like they're already taking initiative to do like the next task. Yeah. But they just want like you for like reassurance. Like, can you look this over? Oh, I wrote this essay for college. Can you read it for me? Like now I'm just like a resource for them. as they grow and they just ask me questions. And like, that's pretty much what like my graduated students use me for. They're like, Ms. Hill, like, so they're telling me I have a Parent Plus loan. Should I sign it? And I'm like, well, let's talk about what other loan options you have. Let's talk about scholarships. So really more of a resource after having them for so long and they're getting older.
Yeah. Yeah. There's still like a need to guide them.
Yeah.
Even after, reading about like an hour. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Not necessarily, unless you have other questions.
So if like, I guess if like a teacher or would-be teachers watching, how do they reach out to you? What's like the best?
Email. The best way to reach me is on email. I do not answer my social media as much as I should. It's flooded with memes. But
memes and spam?
Yeah. Yeah, email is probably like the best way to ever reach me. I love talking to new teachers. I think it's the scariest thing. One of my friends just became a teacher, and it's been pretty fun to like guide them into like this chaos that they're about to enter.
Yeah.
And also like it's a reality check. I feel like being a teacher and then like sticking with it and still being excited about your job makes you like a better person.
Right.
And it's like, and when you leave, I feel like, yeah, man, like that just means you were ready. That just means you left when you needed to leave, because I think you gain a new perspective, but you have to go in there with an open mind, and you can't go into teaching. Teachers out there, you can't go out there teaching with a closed mind. Like, you're not going to be successful. Like, your students are not going to like you. And it's like, and you can't say, well, I don't care if they don't like me. No, you need your students to trust you. You need the parents to trust you. Like, the worst part, I think, about being a teacher is not liking the people you work with. I think that's the worst part. I think dealing with a fight every once in a while, or students throwing a desk around the classroom, it's expected at least one or twice. It's really sad. And I think something to keep in mind, like for new teachers, is really sad. Like when a student passes away that like that's awful.
Yeah.
But it happens. And it's like, not saying that you need to be built for it, but it's like, it is like, it can be a very emotionally driven job.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Having to be, and when it happens, you can't run away. Like, we had a situation at our school where a student brought a weapon, and yeah, that's the reality. Like, it's happening at like almost every campus. Like, it's a weekly thing. It's unfortunate, but
do you think about that a lot?
I do think about that. I think about, like, that's why I wear sneakers to work. I used to wear sandals and like little slides and dress shoes. Now I wear running shoes to work. It can't happen, and it's unfortunate. And I think new teachers coming in need to be aware that it's not the safest place, and they're going to have checklist items where it's like, this is what the drill would look like, and you need to have your real, what you're really going to do in the event of the following situations: any natural disaster, intruder, somebody has a panic attack or a seizure. Like, you need to know what you're actually going to do, and you need to practice that in your classroom. Not just, oh, we have a drill, it's scheduled. Like, you need to practice it. Because when it happens, what are you going to do?
Right.
Because hiding in the corner isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it as much as I should have. Did you see that TikTok video of the parent who dressed up as her daughter and went to school?
No.
And she posted it for her social media. Her whole thing was that she wanted to see how safe the school was. And then she got caught, like, towards the end of the day.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I didn't really think about that stuff as much as I should have, right?
Because it's like we didn't grow up in the same generation of, like, well, I mean, like, things were happening. Things were happening when I was young, but, like, it was also just like, that's like that school. I was like, oh, that's that was just little Jimmy and his friends. You know, that's not like an all the time thing.
Right.
But it is. And it's so easy that you have to teach kids to be aware and smart. But I think more importantly, like, you have to learn to be level headed.
Yeah.
Like, when you have like situations, like, people are going to panic, and you're responsible for the kids in your class in this moment.
Right.
So it's like anything can happen, and it's like you're responsible for these little children.
Yeah.
And so that's already a lot of anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if kids are fighting, you're responsible for these groups of kids. A kid's having a seizure, you're responsible for these groups of kids. Like, somebody gets COVID in the classroom. Well, now we all have it, and you're responsible for this group of kids until further notice. It's a lot of responsibility, and new teachers, you have to recognize that it's not just like you leave at the front door, like, and you're not a teacher anymore. Like, you are a teacher because you get discounts, but also like, you're a teacher when you leave too.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure it's like, you have to practice like those. You have to practice the scenarios. How are you going to react to the situation? What kind of person do you want to be at the end of the day? Like, I don't like to yell, and I don't like to argue. I make that very clear with them. I was like, and if I have to yell, it's like a really bad day. I'm like, I think if I had to yell, like, this is ridiculous. But I keep a megaphone in my class.
Oh, nice.
So I'm like, you guys are too loud. But yeah, it's a lot of responsibility and multitasking, and you have to be okay with doing a lot of work and then somebody telling you that, well, we're not going to do that anymore. Like,
yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, about when I was like in school, and it didn't seem like a lot of crazy things were happening. But I think as I'm older, I like pay attention to the news more.
Yeah.
And well, actually, in high school, 9/11, that was like the biggest thing I can remember. But outside of that, I never really paid too much attention to the news more than I do now. Yeah. Right? So now you're actually kind of scared. You're like, this is kind of like, people can bring guns to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just like, was this happening when I was a kid? You know,
right?
You just didn't have like that accessibility. Because kind of like going back to your technology question, like, they're accessible to like everything. They know what's going on before we know what's going on. And we're like, should we be worried?
Right. Yeah, I think too much information all at one time is not good, right? He's like, kind of like you said, like, there still needs to be somebody to like, hey, help me. What's part A, B, and C? Yeah. Right? There still needs to be somebody to guide you.
Because then you're just lost in information. It's like walking in a library and not knowing the language of the library. You're like, well, where do I start? Like, you have no clue.
Well, for sure. So, can I link your email for like teachers who want to reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming out and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
What, an hour drive?
About like an hour, 14 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad.
Not too bad.
I'm gonna get some sushi after.
Well, cool. Well, yeah. We'll see you later.
See you later. Thank you.